everybody? It's Derek here again, back with Dog Media. Today is Friday, September 22nd. We're going to be going over the Thursday night football game last night and going over some of the Sunday games this weekend, the early games. I apologize, I haven't put a video out in a while. I've been a little sick, as you can hear, probably getting over it. But yeah, let's just get straight into it. Last night was a pretty decent football game. We kind of expected what happened. We knew that was going to happen. The 49ers just smacked the Giants around like ugly stepchild. Bit of a fantasy overview. The 49ers had the top three performers yesterday with Debo Samuel coming in at 25 points in PPR format, Brock Purdy with 24, and Christian McCaffrey with 22. You weren't happy starting any Giants players as Matt Breida led all Giants fantasy players with 10 points. So if Brock Purdy is on your waiver wire and you still are just streaming a quarterback or you don't have a true number one fantasy option for quarterback, Brock Purdy, you may look to pick him up on the waiver wire at the end of the week to see how things play out. Start him against Arizona. I would start him against Dallas even. And then you have really juicy matchups after that. On the Giants side of the ball, Daniel Jones just had a really bad matchup. I don't think anybody was starting him this week. If you were, you should have saw what happened. You should have seen that coming. But Daniel Jones is still a viable fantasy quarterback just because of his sheer volume with his legs. Much like Anthony Richardson, who's not in the best offense with the best play calling, with the best pieces around him, but he has the ability to get out of the pocket and extend plays and get first downs with his legs, get rushing touchdowns. I expect a little bit of the same from Daniel Jones. So don't drop him. Don't panic. This was just a really bad matchup for him. I expect him to do better going forward. All of the other Giants offensive players, I don't want any pieces of. I would hold on to Jalen Hyatt. I would stash him, see how he does once he gets more acclimated with the NFL. There was a stat that came out that said on all of his routes, his average top speed, whether he's throwing the ball or not, is a little bit over 17 miles per hour. That's currently first in the NFL, ahead of Jalen Waddle, ahead of Tyreek Hill. His get off is great. He's that just shows that all of his routes, whether he knows they're designed to him or not, he's giving all of his effort. Full sprint, no plays off is what I like to call it. So that's really something that you love to see out of a rookie. Um, Over their next four, they have Seattle, Washington, Buffalo, and Miami. Not in that order, but that's the four teams they play over the next 4 weeks. Those are very juicy matchups for fantasy players. I think that Jalen Hyatt, over the next course of these next 4, 5, 6 games, they're going to implement him into the offense a little bit more. He's going to be their deep shot guy. That's just something that's one of those things where you're going to have to stash him and wait and see. Matt Breida, again, he has better matchups coming. But from the way Coach Dayball is talking, he said that Saquon Barkley has superhuman healing abilities and that he wasn't ruling him out until game time this week for Thursday Night Football. When at first we thought it was going to be a 3 to 4 week injury where he sat out. That's not the case. He may very well come back next week. We don't know. We don't know the extent of his injury. We're not in his body. If you watched him yesterday, he wasn't in a walking boot. They showed him on the camera a few times. He was walking fine, wasn't limping. Who knows? Maybe by the end of this long week, since they played on Thursday night, by next Sunday, he'll be 100% ready to go. Now, I don't know that, and I'm not counting on it. I'm not counting on I have Saquon Barkley in my league. I'm not counting on him being there for the next couple of weeks. But if he is, if he's playing, you're playing him. Simple as that. Again, Darren Waller, he's in your lineup. He's a very good target for Daniel Jones. Uh, I think he's leading the team in targets right now currently, so you're playing him. But yeah, overall, just a really bad matchup for the Giants, and they've had two really tough games in the first 3 weeks. This is just the schedule makers and the matchmakers doing a disservice to New York. They have had a gauntlet of the first 3 weeks, minus Arizona, but Arizona is a little bit better than I expected. So yeah, their schedule softens up, so expect their offense to unleash a little bit more and get a little bit more scoring going. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the Cam Akers trade. and what that means for Alexander Madison. Everyone, if you've been on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube Reels, whatever it is where you get your fantasy football information, everyone has mixed opinions. Yeah, Cam Akers is gonna come in and be the guy for Minnesota. They don't trust Alexander Madison. You know, I don't think it's gonna be one way or the other. I think this is gonna be a true timeshare. And the only reason why they went out and got a Cam Akers is because they didn't trust Ty Chandler to be a split carry back. Like he's not built to take on half of the workload. He's going to come in and relieve both of them now. He'll get maybe one or two attempts a game, if that. And I think Alexander Madison's production will decrease. And Cam Akers, I'm not expecting much more out of him than he's already given us this season. Cam Akers is a very talented running back. We saw that at the end of last year. He has the ability to take over the backfield. I don't think Alexander Madison is a running back one type of player. I don't think that he is he's built for a workload like how the Vikings were trying to use him. I think the Vikings made a huge mistake in letting Dalvin Cook go. They were a great 1-2 punch. Alexander Madison would come in and relieve Dalvin Cook and hit a 50-yard run. So I think that's what they were looking for when they let Dalvin Cook go, was that explosiveness. And so far this season, we just haven't seen it out of Alexander Madison. I'm not saying Cam Akers has that explosiveness, but what I am saying is Cam Akers is talented. He's a very good running back for the NFL level. I just don't want any of them for fantasy. I think both of their productions levels each other out, and they become running back threes, maybe flex plays on some matchups, but in essence, if you saw this news, you were kind of hurt as an Alexander Madison fan because look, you were trying to trade him, and don't tell anybody that you weren't. I think you were looking for trades, trying to get rid of him, and now with this addition, you're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to get rid of Alexander Madison because nobody's going to want to take a chance on that backfield. Now, like I said, you see some people saying, no, Alexander Madison is still going to get 18, 19 carries a game. You know, I don't see it happen. I don't see there's a world that that happens. I think that it's going to be more of a 10 carry type backfield because the Vikings already don't run the ball as it is. So now you're taking whatever volume Madison did have and halving it and giving it to Cam Akers. And I also think Cam Akers will come in as the better pass catching running back than Alexander Madison. So that'll give him even more of a leg up on him, but at the same time, again, I'm staying away from that backfield. If you can find a suitable trade for Alexander Madison, go ahead and take it. But I'm not trading for him. I'm trading him away only. But without further ado, let's get straight into the early games this coming Sunday. This is week 3. We have the Denver Broncos traveling to Miami to take on the Miami Dolphins. The over under is 48. The Miami Dolphins are 6.5 point favorites. This game I predict to be a shootout. The defense on for Denver is not as good as we thought they were going to be, or as Rex Ryan likes to say, as good as they should have been with him as a defensive coordinator. They have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. They just haven't put it together yet. Pat Surtain, of course, one of the best, if not the best corner in the league right now. And then on the Miami side of the ball, who went all in this offseason to revamp their defense, they bring in Bradley Chubb. They bring in Jalen Ramsey, who won't be playing in this game, unfortunately. Their defense hasn't looked like it's a top end, salary defense. They got gashed by the Los Angeles Chargers, who, in all fairness, is a really great throw the ball down the field type of team. But even with New England, they were getting beat defensively. Yes, they stopped the run a lot better against New England than they did against the Chargers. But still, I expect this to be a closer game. I expect Denver to cover the 6.5 point spread. I am upgrading Russell Wilson this week. I think Miami's secondary is very, very beatable. And I think that Denver has the tools to do so. I think they have a great wide receiving core with Judy and Sutton. I think Javonte Williams is going to have a monster. This is going to be his breakout quote unquote coming back party. Think he's gonna finally unleash. They're gonna let him go. It's been 2 weeks now, and he's got the looks, he's got the carries, but it still feels like Sean Payton was holding him back a little bit. I think this is the game type, the game script, where they're just gonna let Javonte Williams go. They're gonna let him off the leash, give him the all of the carries, all of the snaps. Of course, Samaje Perine is still there. He's a very viable running back as well. He's someone to monitor. I know he hit my waivers this week. I'm not picking him up personally. I have too many backup running backs like Devon A. Chain and Sean Tucker on my bench already. I can't afford to have uh, Samaje Perine on my team. Next, the Buffalo Bills travel to Washington to take on the Commanders. With the Bills being a 6.5 point underdog, the over under is 43.5. The Bills haven't looked great this year. They looked better last week than they did in week one. But this is a get right game for the Bills. This is a game in which the game script can go very well for their team. The Washington Commanders aren't going to force the turnovers that the Jets would force or even the Raiders could force. The Washington Commanders are a bend don't break defense. I think this is a game where Josh Allen is a quarterback number one on the week, just with the other quarterbacks, the top end quarterbacks, their matchup. I think James Cook has a big game this week. Of course, I want to see I want to see Gabe Davis do what he did last week every week. I think he has the ability to, but you have to remember Stephon Diggs is there. That's not always going to be the case. And unfortunately, with Gabe Davis, like I said last week, I thought last week was going to be one of his boom games on the year. I don't think that's the case this year. The matchup looks juicy. The matchup looks great. I just think it's a Stephon Diggs type of game. I think this is where they're going to give him the ball, force feed him, look for Stephon Diggs to have more than 9 catches. I would if his pick'em or his betting line right now, his prop bet is over under 7 receptions. I'm taking the over on it for this game. But on the Washington side of the ball, I don't trust anybody right now except Brian Robinson Jr. I don't like where Terry McLaurin is in the offense. I don't like how they're utilizing Jahan Dotson in the offense. So Brian Robinson Jr. is the only player that I'm playing from Washington. This is a game where we'll talk about a little bit later in DFS. I'm taking the Buffalo Bills defense. They have them outrageously cheap on DraftKings right now. And I think this is a game where Buffalo's defense can really feast on a subpar O line that the Washington Commanders have. Next, we got the Houston Texans traveling to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. The over under is 44, and the Jacksonville Jaguars are 8.5 point favorites. This game, I think, is going to be a shootout. I think I want pieces of each offense on this in this game. I want Trevor Lawrence. I'm even if you have a quarterback that you're unsure of, if Joe Burrow ends up not playing, if they roll him out, pick up CJ Stroud and start him this week. I think CJ Stroud, the game scripts that he's going to be in, they're 8.5 point underdogs. He's going to be throwing the ball a lot. He's going to be throwing the ball a lot all year. He hasn't turned the ball over yet either. CJ Stroud in his last 2 games, and I take that back. CJ Stroud has fumbled. I mean, he hasn't thrown an interception. But CJ Stroud in his last 2 games, week one against a very good Baltimore defense, 242 yards through the air. Week two against Indianapolis, 384 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was good enough for a top five quarterback performance on the week. CJ Stroud is going to be a viable fantasy stream. I'm not saying he's a viable fantasy every week start. I don't know if he ends as a top 10 quarterback because as a rookie quarterback, the turnovers and mistakes are going to come. He's been very good at mitigating those mistakes. Again, only fumbling twice on the year, not throwing interceptions, which is very rare from a rookie quarterback in his first 2 games, but almost approaching 400 yards through the air is something that makes a fantasy football player just reach out and yell, woohoo, I guess. I don't know what it does. I've never had a quarterback throw for over 350 in my fantasy league. So with that being said, with them being down and throwing a lot, Nico Collins is locked in your lineup right now. He looks like a really good pickup that most if he's probably not sitting on your waiver wires, but if he is, pick him up and start him. Tank Dell, I would start him this week and then wait and see because Tank Dell has progressively gotten better. I think he's going to take over as CJ Stroud's number one target. If you recall at the draft, CJ Stroud had one request to the Houston Texans about who he wanted on that team, and it was Tank Dell. So I think over the course of the season, Tank Dell is going to eventually emerge as the wide receiver one for that team. But for right now, it's Nico Collins, and even Robert Woods is a viable start in a deeper league as a flex play. Really good wide receiver, a veteran, go-to guy, much like what you're seeing out of Adam Thielen in Carolina. Dameon Pierce has had a rough start to the season, but that's just game script. I mean, they can't run the ball like they really, really want to. They're down, they're putting the ball into the rookie's hands and letting him sling it, which rightfully so. They've been down early in both of their games so far this season. I think that won't change. Dameon Pierce needs to they need to get in the red zone and he needs to get red zone carries to get his touchdowns because other than that, he's going to get volume, so you still want to start him. He's a volume start, but he's not a guy that's just going to take over and go for 30 plus fantasy points on any given week. He has the ability, he's not in the situation. Dameon Pierce is very talented. He's just not in a situation to where he can be a top 5 running back on the year. And you didn't draft him to be, right? You didn't draft him to be a top 5 running back. He shouldn't be your running back number 1. If he is, hopefully you have better wide receivers to pick up his slack, but I am downgrading Dameon Pierce until I see more. On the Jaguars side of the ball, of course, Trevor Lawrence and Calvin really the Jaguars offense in general had a really down week last week. I think they bounce back. This is a very great opportunity for them to bounce back. Anthony Richardson was absolutely destroying the Texans last week until he got hurt. He had 18 fantasy points in the first quarter. He was on his way to a monster game, but he got the concussion, ruled him out, ended up putting Zach Moss had a great game. So that's what I'm looking out of for Travis Etienne is a Zach Moss type of performance from last week where Etienne just goes off. I love Travis Etienne. I loved him at Clemson. I think he is super talented. I I don't want to see him lose his job to Tank Bigsby, but I feel like that time is coming soon unless he can put together a really huge game. And this matchup just screams that for him. So start Travis Etienne, of course. Start Calvin Ridley. Christian Kirk had the biggest day out of all wide receivers last week. And I think that's going to be the case all season. I think week one, it was Ridley and even Zay Jones had a really good game. Week two, it was Christian Kirk. I think Zay Jones got injured. That's going to be the course of the season for these Jaguars receiving core. Evan Ingram's going to have a day where he's the target hog. I think that's a game plan that Doug Peterson likes to do. If you recall when he was in Philly, of course, he was a very running back heavy. We wanted him to be running back heavy, right? And he was. That's what won us the Super Bowl was our run game and our ability to set the tone on the ground to open up the air. But if you recall that year the Eagles won the Super Bowl with Doug Peterson, it was a revolving door of who was fantasy relevant at wide receiver or tight end. Of course, then you had Zach Ertz, who was there every week, but I look to see Evan Ingram get involved a little bit more in this offense. I think this is an Evan Ingram game and possibly even a Calvin Ridley game. Now, temper expectations for pass catchers and Trevor Lawrence because they're going to get up big and rely on Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. That's why I say this is a huge Travis Etienne game. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars will blow out the Houston Texans this week. So I want pieces of all of the offense, but temper expectations for the Jaguars. I mean, yeah, for the Jaguars. Next, we have the Indianapolis Colts traveling to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. The Indianapolis Colts are 8-point underdogs. The over-under is 44. I think the Colts, if Anthony Richardson plays, you start him this week. I think he's a locked-in quarterback number one now. Monitor his concussion status. He didn't practice Thursday. He didn't practice Wednesday. He has one more chance to get off of the injury report. Monitor that. If he's not playing, look, CJ Stroud is an option. We'll go over some streaming options at the end of the video, but monitor his practice status. Zach Moss is in your lineup. He's starting. He's a stud. Josh Downs, again, like I said last week, someone to keep an eye on. He's slowly getting more and more snaps, more and more acclimated to this offense. He is a very talented wide receiver. I think he eventually takes over as a true wide receiver too, and really starts getting those targets in. Michael Pittman, of course, you're starting him on the Baltimore side of the ball. I wouldn't roster both of them, but you would start both of them in a league. Justice Hill and Gus Edwards, I think they're both viable fantasy starts. Now, Justice Hill is on the injury report. Monitor that. I don't know if he's practiced. I haven't looked into Justice Hill's injury, but if you do have him, make sure you're monitoring his status come game time. If not, grade Gus Edwards to a solidified running back number one. Wide receivers, of course, Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. Rashad Bateman may come in and have a pretty decent game if Odell Beckham is out. But other than that, I'm really only comfortable and confident starting Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews. Next, we have the Atlanta Falcons going to Detroit to take on the Lions. The over-under is 46.5, with the Detroit Lions being 3-point favorites. So this is predicted to be a shootout. This should be a very, very fun game. And I say shootout, it's going to be a shootout versus a run out. Now, the Atlanta Falcons are so good at running the ball that Bijan Robinson is locked in as a top five, probably top three running back on the week again. The Detroit Lions side of the ball, Jahmyr Gibbs looks to hopefully get all of the workload. Again, look at Craig Reynolds. I know he came in and had a lot of snaps last week when Montgomery came out. I don't know the utilization that they're going to have for Jahmyr Gibbs, but this is a battle of two first round running backs, one taken at pick number 8, the other taken at pick number 12. So just be on the lookout for this to be a running back game. I know nobody cares about the storyline of two first round rookie running backs taking 4 picks apart, but that is going to be a big deal. Bijan Robinson is going to be the focal point of this offense this week. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs might have to step up and be a bigger focal point if Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't play. That leaves you with Josh Reynolds as wide receiver number one, Sam Laporta, and who else? Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs might have to step up and get 6, 7, 8, 9 targets, carry the ball 14 times. He may have 20 touches in this game. Now, what he does with them remains yet to be seen. But I think this is going to be a game of you're locked in with Bijan. You're even probably at this point you need to trade Tyler Algier. I think he's slowly fading out. He touched the ball a lot, but he didn't do nothing with them. Bijan Robinson had more snaps. He's a handcuff at best right now this week. You're starting Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, if Amon-Ra St. Brown is out, you should be starting Josh Reynolds. He had a really good game last week. I think he's a trusted target for Jared Goff. And I think that Sam Laporta is also a viable start for this offense. On the Falcons side of the ball, the only pass catcher you're starting is Drake London. You should have already dropped Kyle Pitts or tried to trade him. I hope you were able to trade him for someone. If not, it's looking like at this point you may call me crazy, but you need to drop him. I dropped him personally. Well, in one league I dropped him, and in one league I was able to package him with Amon-Ra St. Brown to receive Pat Fryermuth and Bijan Robinson. So I got rid of it, packaged him, I shipped him off. But in my other leagues where I drafted him, because I was expecting a better year from him, I just cut him. I cut him for Luke Musgrave. I cut him for Sam Laporta. I cut him for a few different style of tight ends who I think are in better situations to catch and to get targets. Next, we have the New England Patriots traveling not very far to New Jersey to take on the New York Jets. This is a very low over under. I'm not excited about this game at all. It's just going to be a defensive slugfest. The over under is 36.5, with the Patriots being 2.5 point road favorites. I like Devontae Parker. Of course, Hunter Henry is now locked into your lineup after 2 great weeks. He looks to be the best target, the best pass catcher on that New England Patriots offense. However, Devontae Parker came out and had a pretty decent game against Miami in his first game back from injury. I think they're going to acclimate him more in this offense. I think he's going to be a focal point for the pass catchers. Devontae Parker is someone that I'm looking to stash and hold on to for a couple of weeks to see if his involvement grows. If it doesn't grow, he doesn't have the ability to have that upside that some of these other players have, like a rookie who's still working into the offense or someone of that nature. This is a veteran who has the ability to just command targets. So if he doesn't do that within the next couple of weeks, I don't see that changing for him over the course of the season. Again, start Ramondre Stevenson. You're not starting Ezekiel Elliott yet. He hasn't done enough in this offense to become fantasy relevant. Mac Jones is a viable pickup if you need, but I do think that CJ Stroud is a better stream this week against a very good New York Jets secondary. On the Jets side of the ball, if you have him still, you probably have to start Garrett Wilson if you don't have a pivot. I think honestly, I'm starting a lot of players over Garrett Wilson. He has the ability, like I talked about, that Devontae Parker doesn't necessarily have, where we have yet to see Garrett Wilson's true ceiling. We have yet to see what he is truly capable of because I was so excited for the Aaron Rodgers year because I think we would have been able to see the full potential of Garrett Wilson. We're not going to get that with Zach Wilson. So I'm really leaning towards starting other players over him. I think I'm start the with the draft cost that you had for him. I don't think it's very smart to bench him because I doubt you have another wide receiver that you could play over him. But me personally, I'm playing like Mike Evans and Keenan Allen over Garrett Wilson as my wide receiver 1 and 2. There were great wide receivers at the end of the draft that are now starting to break out. Look, call me crazy, but I'm starting Nico Collins over Garrett Wilson this week. If I went like wide receiver, and I went, say, Amon Ra or AJ Brown and then Garrett Wilson on the turn, I'm starting both of those guys over him. Uh, or if I went Garrett Wilson, Amon Ra on the turn, and then say picked up a Keenan Allen or a Mike Evans later on in the draft, I'm starting Mike Evans or Keenan Allen over Garrett Wilson all day long. I even to go to the extent of I would start mm, probably Zay Flowers this week over Garrett Wilson. Zay Flowers is just in a better offense, better matchup. He's gonna be the number one he's going to be the number one wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens this week, and he has a better quarterback. And that's saying a lot because Lamar isn't really known for stretching the ball downfield. I'm starting Garrett Wilson in leagues where, like, if it's a 12 or 14 team league, you probably don't have the bench depth to start someone over Garrett Wilson. That's the only time that I'm starting him. Again, I'm starting Brees Hall. I think he's going to get more than 4 touches this week. He's going to have a big game. I think he's ready. I think he's fully healthy. We saw it week 1. The only thing that he needed to do was get back in shape. Now, with 2 weeks under his belt, 2 full practices, I think, or limited practices. I think he's ready. I think it's time for him to get 16 touches. Next, the LA Chargers travel to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. This is going to be the last one that we cover on the day. This is my fantasy game of the week. The over under at 54. The Minnesota Vikings are favored by 1. Justin Jefferson is going to go off. Jordan Addison is going to go off. I'm not counting on, again, like I said, I'm not counting on Alexander Madison to go off, but this is a game where he can prove, hey, you made a mistake trading for Cam Akers. This is my backfield. If he's going to do that and make a statement, it's this game against the Chargers. If this game is going to tell us what the Minnesota Vikings are probably going to do with the backfield. If Alexander Madison has a terrible game against the LA Chargers, that's it for him, I think. Kirk Cousins, the fantasy quarterback number 1 so far on the year, locked in your lineup. And you were able to get him at a discount price too. That's a very good late round pickup. Charger side of the ball, lock in Mike Williams, lock in Keenan Allen. Gerald Everett may even have a pretty decent game if he can get into the end zone. He's touchdown dependent only this week. I wouldn't be starting him if I didn't have to. Joshua Kelly is not Austin Eckler. That's all I'm going to say about that. Do with that information what you will. But no, Joshua Kelly is not someone that I'm excited to start. Again, if you had Austin Eckler and picked him up, you're not excited either. He's not Austin Eckler. Now, if you are a other team that happened to pick him up and stash him on your bench, sure, maybe he's a flex start for you. But if he's your replacement for Austin Eckler, you're not excited because he's not Austin Eckler. So, yeah, that's gonna do it for today's episode. We went over some of the early games. We'll finish out tomorrow with the afternoon games, a couple more early games, and 2 Monday night games. So be on the lookout for that episode tomorrow. This one's going live today again, September 22nd, 2023. Uh, I hope you all have a great day, a great weekend,